Aiya meldor a todos nuestros amigos y amigas de la Sociedad Tolkien de México y de The Anglo Library. Estamos aquí hoy con William Fliss, que les voy a leer su semblanza en español. Es el archivista de Tolkien en la Universidad Marquette. Ha ocupado este cargo desde 2012. Es originario de Wisconsin. Tiene una maestría en estudios de biblioteca e información de la Universidad de Wisconsin y un doctorado en historia de la Universidad de Marquette. Es responsable de muchas colecciones y manuscritos de la Universidad Marquette, pero específicamente la colección Tolkien ocupa la mayor parte de su tiempo. Y ahora en inglés. So William Fliss is the Tolkien archivist at the Marquette University. He has served in the capacity since 2012. He is a native Wisconsin and holds a master's in library and information studies degree from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee and a PhD in history from the Marquette University. Although he is responsible for many manuscript collections at the Marquette University, the Tolkien collection takes up the largest share of his time. And I am here as part of the Anglo Library to talk with you, librarian to librarian, about this great collection that you have over there. We have some questions from the Tolkien Society here in Mexico, so we are going to begin with the first one. So can you please tell me how did the work of Tolkien came into your life?
So into my life personally, as a young boy, I was introduced to it, I think, by my older siblings. Had to read the book in school, and that's when I first heard about it. And then in the 1970s, there was an animated version of The Hobbit that appeared on American television, and I saw that, and that's when I became a fan from that age.
Do you have a personal collection for yourself, or is it only the one that you have at the library?
I have some Tolkien books that I've collected, but I don't consider myself a personal collector. The collecting I do is for Marquette, and I think when I retire, I'll just retire to my little library of Tolkien books, and I'll be very happy.
I think that's something that, in my case, is also something very common because I love my library. So I don't collect that many books for myself. I just think I can have all the library for myself and for the public as well. So why should I collect more things? I do have specific things, probably just as you, but the main collection remains for the public, right?
Yep.
Wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit about your role as the archivist or in charge of the Tolkien collection?
Sure, yeah. So I became the Tolkien archivist when the previous archivist left to get a job somewhere else, and I filled in as a temporary position, and then the dean of the library decided to make it a permanent role that I would play in the archives. And that was, as you mentioned in the introduction, that was in 2012. So it's been, 12 years now that I've been working with the collection. And the work I do with it, there's part of it is collection development, acquiring new things for the collection. It's also helping people who contact us with questions or who want to come here and do research. So there's a reference aspect to the work I do. There's a fair amount of outreach, meaning like programming that I get involved in, doing podcasts like this or hosting events at Marquette that are about Tolkien. So for example, 2 years ago, we did a major exhibition at the museum here on campus where we were able to showcase a large number of the manuscripts from our collection.
Awesome. And for the people that do not know, I mean, we have already said that you are in charge of the Tolkien collection. Can you maybe explain, or would you like to try to describe it for us? Like, what is it?
Sure. The heart of the collection are the manuscripts that we received directly from Professor Tolkien. They arrived in 1957 and 1958, and then his son Christopher Tolkien sent additional manuscripts to Marquette in the 1980s and 1990s. And the manuscripts are those for The Hobbit, which was his first published work of fiction, for two lesser-known works, which I'm sure many of your members are familiar with and have read. One is called Farmer Giles of Ham, which was it's not set in Middle Earth or in Arda, but it's set in a medieval England. we have the manuscripts for that work. And then also an illustrated children's book he did called Mr. Bliss. And then last but not least, we have the manuscripts for The Lord of the Rings, which is his great magnum opus. So when I say that we have the manuscripts, it means we have almost all the material that went into writing the books. So many drafts of different chapters, handwritten and typewritten documents, plot notes, almost everything from the first concept to when it was published is here at Marquette. It's a very big collection, thousands and thousands of pages of material. And it's been here almost, well over 60 years now. And that's the heart of the collection. And that's what I think Marquette's famous for. But then years ago, after we received the collection, Marquette decided to expand and to collect in other areas of Tolkien. So we try to collect everything that's published about him, books. We also document the fandom that has arisen around Tolkien. The old fandom before the internet was the main way fans stayed in touch, I think, were through there were conventions and conferences, but also through fanzines or.
Oh, yes, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. There's some connection with. I'm not sure what that was. I apologize. So the fan magazines were how people stayed in touch, and so we have an enormous collection of fan magazines that have been produced over the years. So there's the manuscripts, and then there's all the books and secondary literature about Tolkien, and then there's the all the material on the fandom that we collect as well.
Awesome. And how would you say that your collection or the Marquette collection is different from other collections around the world? I mean, you have said that you have the manuscripts, but also and that you have the fandom. Would you say that the fandom is the thing that differentiates you from the other collections, or what would that be?
No, I think the manuscripts really are what set us apart, because there are other repositories that have fandom materials. There are fanzines collections with Tolkien collection titles at other libraries, I know, here in the United States and then elsewhere, I'm sure. But the manuscripts for those works, there's no other place that they are besides here. They haven't been duplicated anywhere else. The other place I think in the world to go to for Tolkien archives, Tolkien manuscripts, is the Bodleian Library at the Oxford University. And then also just south of us near Chicago, there's the Wade Center at Wheaton College, which has some Tolkien material there as well. But the manuscripts are really divided up mostly between here at Marquette and the Bodleian at Oxford. And so the Bodleian has Tolkien's, the works, I think the broader legendarium, the Silmarillion legends, those manuscripts are over at Oxford. So what we have is just Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Farmer Giles of Ham, and Mr. Bliss.
Okay, and you said that it was because of Christopher that approached the university to have this collection. Do you know a little bit more about how was that?
So let me clarify that. Christopher helped additional manuscripts come here, but he was not involved in the initial acquisition of the collection. What happened was that the director of Marquette's library, a man named William Reedy, approached Professor Tolkien directly. He hired a friend of his in England to serve as Marquette's agent, and he asked Professor Tolkien if he would sell his manuscripts to Marquette. And this was late 1956 when Reedy approached Tolkien, and he was in the right place at the right time and happened to be the first to ask. And so Tolkien agreed to sell the manuscripts, and that's why they came here. But then a few years later in 1965, Professor Tolkien wrote to Marquette with a question about some additional about some of the manuscripts that he had sent years earlier. And in the course of that letter, he mentioned that he had additional manuscripts that were still in his possession, that he thought they should come to Marquette, that the idea was that had they been in front of him in the late 1950s, he would have sent them along as well. And so nothing happened with that for several years. And then Professor Tolkien died, and then his son Christopher became the literary executor of his estate. And then Christopher very graciously decided to follow through on his father's wishes, and he organized and arranged those other manuscripts. And this was all material for the Lord of the Rings, and it was a lot of material, over 3,000 pages. So it increased the size of the collection by 50%. And he sent that material here to Marquette to join the papers that we received in the 1950s. So he played a very important role in having those additional manuscripts come to Marquette. But he also played a very important role in helping us understand the collection, because as many of your members of your society are aware, Christopher spent many years writing the history of Middle Earth, this 12-volume history of his father's secondary world. And within those 12 volumes, there are volumes, I think 6, 7, and 8, primarily, that talk about how he wrote The Lord of the Rings, how Professor Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings. And he based the research for that on the manuscripts that were at Marquette and then the manuscripts that he sent to Marquette. So he helped us enormously in understanding what it was that we had.
Thank you. And now, considering that you have this collection, and you were saying that you help scholars or researchers with their topics, but what else, like for the main audience, like if we are just part of the public or we're just users, what can we get from like how can we access the collection or the process of it? Like can you explain us a little bit more about the role of the collection and how we as a public will be able to access it, or if you have workshops, or what else can you tell us about it?
That's a very good question, and the answer is one that a lot of people won't like to hear, and that's that because of the copyright situation, we're limited in what we can do with the manuscripts. So, for example, in the last several years, I've undertaken a project to reprocess the manuscript collection and scan and make the manuscripts available digitally here at Marquette for researchers to consult when they come in. The original manuscripts, because they're so valuable and in many cases so fragile, because he was writing on poor quality paper, we don't let people handle the original documents, and so researchers who come here now will use digital scans to study the manuscripts. And so I created this project to make that much easier to do, but because of the copyright situation, we don't own the copyright to the manuscript material. That's retained by the Tolkien estate. Mm-hmm. And so we can't, put it all up, put the images out online for everybody to see, because that's a form of publication, and it can't be done without the agreement of the Tolkien estate. And I don't think, I know that they wouldn't support something like that at this time. So to answer your question, to really see a lot of the collection, you have to come, unfortunately, visit Milwaukee to immerse yourself in the collection. That's kind of what we're limited to right now. Unfortunately, that's the case there. I mean, if people contact with specific questions, it's possible we could answer them. But just in terms of seeing all the manuscripts, I'm afraid it's access is limited.
Of course. No, I guess that it has a lot of challenges to have these manuscripts that are still under the Tolkien estate, and at the same time trying to help the audience or the public with their research.
It's very difficult, and I hate making people unhappy.
But it's really not up to you.
Yeah, there's not a lot I can do. I mean, we have in the past we have loaned manuscripts to exhibitions. We've did one there was one in Oxford and one in Paris and one in New York, and then one here in Milwaukee a couple of years ago that I mentioned. So that's a way we've provided access to the collection as well. Those are a lot of work though to organize and arrange, and so even if we're just loaning the stuff out and not necessarily running it ourselves, so I don't. There probably won't be one of those for a while. I feel bad because I feel like I have nothing to offer the members of your group. Like I can't say, here, go here, and you can see all this stuff because unfortunately, it's the access is so limited.
No, I can totally understand that. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the state of the materials and like the preservation and conservation, like the how are the manuscripts? Like, can you maybe describe it? Of course, maybe you cannot show us everything, but maybe you can describe a little bit how are the state of the materials and like for the people that do not know how libraries or in your case archives handle the materials, what are you doing to preserve it? Can you explain a little bit more about that process?
Sure. As I mentioned, it's a very big collection. When you add up all of the pages together, it's over 11,000 pages of material. And the way it's organized, those 11,000 pages, especially in The Lord of the Rings, takes up over 9,000 of those pages. So The Lord of the Rings is far and away the biggest single chunk. But you would expect that because it's so, I mean, The Lord of the Rings is so much bigger than The Hobbit or than Farmer Giles or Mr. Bliss. But it's generally arranged by draft of chapter, because Tolkien was a writer who constantly was creating new drafts of chapters. In some cases, there are maybe over a dozen different drafts of a particular chapter in The Lord of the Rings. And so they're organized really by draft of chapter, most basically, I think. And they're housed in acid-free folders. And then those acid-free folders are in special archival boxes. They have a flap that comes up there. They look like a clam. They're called clamshell boxes because they kind of look like a clam. And they're full of the folders of drafts. And then those are we have a special vault area that we put those in. And the storage area is very carefully controlled with temperature and relative humidity to try and to preserve them as long as possible. And we try not to take them out. Or we try to limit the number of times that we take them out of the storage. So they're usually, in the dark, in a nice, cool location. And so we only bring them out on occasion to help preserve them longer. I don't know, I'm not sure what else to say about that.
I'm guessing that you have everything digitalized. So for you, like in order to check on or any information, you will go to the digital archives, not really the physical archives, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
and I have
that. Sorry, would you like to say something else?
Oh, I was just going to say, sometimes we do get visitors who are passing through Milwaukee who stop and want to see the material. We do keep a display of reproductions on display in our reading room of our archives for people that are passing through town. But unfortunately, those original manuscripts, they aren't able to access those. And if I just don't have the time to do private showings of the manuscripts, and it wouldn't be good preservation-wise to keep pulling them out, because honestly, if I did that, I feel like that's all I would be doing. I'd be getting emails from people saying, "Oh, I'm going to be stopping by Friday afternoon. Can I see this?" And well, there goes my Friday afternoon.
I bet that we will do that as well if we were able to do that. But no, I can understand why you have to be so jealous about it, because you want to preserve this for ages to come. I was also thinking about if you have this amount of material, like you said, that more than 11,000 pages. Is there any material that you still haven't been able to catalog properly because there's still some doubts whether they belong to something or something else?
I think everything we have I think we know what everything is. There's nothing that's not connected to those works. But there are pages within the Lord of the Rings collection that were not so clear how they fit into the picture exactly of when he drafted them and how they connect to the other manuscripts. But I think we know pretty much where everything came from. We have a few pages of material from the Silmarillion. When Professor Tolkien, after he finished The Lord of the Rings, when he returned to the Silmarillion to keep working on it, to revise it, we have a few pages, maybe 3 or 4, from the Silmarillion that somehow came over with the Lord of the Rings material. But that's about all I can think of that's not directly part of what we have here.
Okay.
Everything else is somehow connected. There are some manuscript pages that Christopher wasn't entirely sure how they connect up, and so those are here as well. What I'm hoping is that as researchers are able to work with the collection more easily through the digital scans, that they can help us identify what some of these things are.
Wonderful. And coming back to the research that you have been doing, we would like to know what kind of research or projects you are undergoing right now, or maybe if you can tell us a little bit about the most important ones or the ones that caught your attention more, like maybe explain a little bit.
Yeah, with the manuscripts, most of my time lately has been absorbed with this project of scanning and creating a database here at Marquette that people can use to study the manuscripts. And there's still a lot more work to be done on that. It's usable, but it needs more development. And so that's probably the biggest project in front of me, is just to keep working on that. And I think that when the point comes when I retire, I hopefully can look back and see that as my major contribution to Tolkien studies, is that I was able to take all the manuscripts and find a way to make them easier to navigate for researchers. And maybe, who knows, maybe the day will come someday when we'll be able to kind of just put everything out there for people to enjoy. So that's a major project. I've also been doing development in the area of fandom, documenting the fandom. I began a project to collect oral histories from fans. I'm still doing that. My goal was to collect 6,000 interviews. I wanted to have one fan for each rider of Rohan that King Theoden musters to lead to Minas Tirith, because he had 6,000 riders in his host. And I have about 1,250 right now, so I've got a long ways to go. So if any of you, the members of your group, would like to participate in that, I would be happy to have them have their voices join the collection. I've collected interviews from 40 different countries within those 1,250. So it's definitely not just an American thing, or a U.S. thing, or a Wisconsin thing. It's everybody in the world. So that's an ongoing project that takes up a fair amount of my time as well. So those are, I think, the two big ones on the horizon. I feel a little pressure lately, though, because I have so many other collections I'm responsible for, and so my time on Tolkien is like under pressure to shrink, because we have staff retirements, and then the people don't get replaced, and so the the work gets spread over fewer people, and so the amount of time I can devote to Tolkien is getting smaller, unfortunately. So right now, those two projects are the main ones.
No, I do understand the challenges of an understaffed library, trust me.
Yeah.
So besides you working on the Tolkien archives, is there another institution or another partner association that is working with them, or is just you?
No, the work with the collection is really just here at Marquette. There are people that come and use it, researchers, but they're usually not part of a larger organization. We've collaborated for exhibitions, we've collaborated with other libraries that have been hosting the exhibitions. But most of the work done here at Marquette is really just internal. Occasionally we'll hire specific people to help with parts of the work. So for example, there's a Tolkien scholar named John Ratliff who wrote a history of the Hobbit. And he got his doctorate from Marquette, and we hired him to help us organize the collection for the digital project. With his expertise, he could help us understand the manuscripts. And then there's another Tolkien scholar, Eric Mueller-Harder, who's a software developer, and he's been instrumental in kind of creating the software that allows us to have the database with the digital scans for researchers to use. So those are people we've collaborated with. They're not necessarily institutions, but they're just individuals that have a specific knowledge that we need to keep our work going here at Marquette.
Awesome. So eventually you can send us the information about how we can collaborate with you in order to have part of these 6,000 warriors or Rohan warriors. We have also questions regarding maybe you can, I'm not sure if you will be able to show us something. You said that because of the state, the Tolkien state, it's very difficult to have, but maybe if you cannot show us something particularly, can you tell us maybe about curiosity or something that is an anecdote about the collection, or something that you have found out that is very interesting or that you wouldn't know as a general audience about something particular about the collection, or maybe a piece, or yes, we are very curious.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's difficult. Yeah, I don't have anything at hand to show, and I don't know, since it's being published widely, I can't really show like manuscripts necessarily. But behind me, which side? There we go. Oh, back behind me, there's a painting on the wall. We have a picture of Professor Tolkien back there, and then next to it is a painting, and this is a painting we received from Professor Tolkien. And if any of the members of your group have read Doug Armstrong's or the Illustrated Hobbit, this is a painting that he I don't know how I can kind of show it here. Jeez, here, maybe just kind of go up, stand up over here. This is a painting from that was done by a German artist named Horace Engels of The Hobbit. Horace Engels was the artist who did the illustrations for the first German language version of The Hobbit, and this was published in the annotated Hobbit, pardon me. And you can see it's really interesting because it's a kind of a variety of different images from The Hobbit. And what's really interesting is this depiction of Gollum. I don't know if you can really see it from the kind of go in here.
Ah, yes, in the back.
There's Bilbo and Gollum looks very strange. He's enormous, and he's in this big thing in this boat, and it doesn't really seem like the Gollum that we would be familiar with at all. But there's an interesting explanation for that. This painting was done in 1946, and so that was before the second edition of The Hobbit was published. And Tolkien, when the first edition of The Hobbit, chapter 5, Riddles in the Dark, that chapter was different in the first edition, because when he wrote The Hobbit, Tolkien didn't know that this magic ring that Bilbo finds is the ruling ring, the great, the great ring from the Lord of the Rings. That all developed while he was writing the Lord of the Rings. And so he didn't, in the first edition, he didn't provide a lot of description of Gollum. But then when he revised that chapter for the second edition, or a revision appeared in the second edition, and Gollum, he changed it so that Gollum is described more like a hobbit, because during that time, Gollum became Smeagol, the hobbit, who acquired the ring and had it for all those years. That wasn't in his mind when he originally wrote The Hobbit. And so Horace Engels, the artist, is working off of the first edition description of Gollum, which was very limited. And so that was what his imagination came up with for describing this character that would become so important in the Lord of the Rings. So that's kind of it's a neat piece. I don't know that Professor Tolkien really liked it. Maybe that's why he sent it to Marquette. He didn't really care for it, and thought, well, I'll just put it in with the box going to Marquette. but it's a nice piece that we have here at Marquette. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting little pieces that have that are in the collection. Because of these exhibitions that have happened, a lot of pages from our collection have been published in catalogs that go with the exhibition. So, for example, the 2018 exhibition at Oxford, they had a wonderful catalog, Maker of Middle Earth, where a lot of manuscripts were reproduced there. For our exhibition in 2022, we had an exhibition catalog where we were able to reproduce a lot of really neat manuscripts. And if any of your members are able to get a hold of those books, they really provide a kind of nice look at Tolkien, his working drafts of the stories. At Marquette, there aren't any like entirely new stories that have been unpublished, that have never been published. But I mean, there are manuscript pages that haven't been seen, and there may be more information to mine and find in the manuscripts that hasn't been brought to light yet. And I hope that people are able to do that. Your question was like, was there like anything in particular that that's kind of
that would be different, or maybe you can tell us about your favorite piece?
It changes from time, like the favorite one changes over time. But one of them I really like that appeared in the exhibition in Paris at the French National Library, but wasn't published in their exhibition book, is a page of doodles from when Tolkien was writing the Lord of the Rings. He was on vacation with his family, and he's just doodling, drawing pictures and writing words on this piece of paper. And it's an interesting picture into his imagination as he's doodling on this page. And even though he's on vacation and relaxing, part of his mind is thinking about this story that he's doing, because there are some notes on the page as well about the plot of the Lord of the Rings at that point. And this was like less than a year after he started writing it, so it was very early in the process. So that's a favorite of mine, I would say, right now. There are a lot of interesting ones in there.
Okay. There's also questions about if the collection has been valued.
It has. I'm probably due to have it reappraised again. I think it's been 10 years since I had it last appraised. We don't share what that value is, but obviously it's significant. Tolkien's it's a priceless collection, really. But it has been, and I think it would have to be for the risk management department at Marquette would require it to be appraised. But I think the value keeps going up and up. So it's about time I get somebody to reappraise it again, for sure. The value of the collection really rose heavily once once Professor Tolkien died in 1973. Then when an author dies, the value of the papers usually goes up a lot. So it did. Before his death, Marquette used to loan the manuscripts out much more freely than we do now. They weren't as valuable back then because he was still alive, and he wasn't quite as popular as he would later become. So, but now we loan the manuscripts out very infrequently.
And in this case, is it like a whole, or does it have different sections in which one is more valuable than the other?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about valuing something, because it could be that you have a draft of a chapter, and maybe within that draft there are a couple pages that have like a drawing on them or a sketch, and so obviously that's like really cool, the artwork in there, but that page is part of a draft, and so you have I don't know how to explain it, but
it's part of a whole.
Yeah, exactly. And so if say one page something happened to one page, it affects the value of the whole draft because it's a component of it. So it's very complicated. I mean, one of the challenges of appraising a collection like the one at Marquette is that when appraisers determine the value of something, they do it by looking at what other things have sold for. They look at the history of what other things have cost, and then they base their value off of that. But in the case of manuscripts by Tolkien, there's not a long history of sales of them. There are a lot of letters by Tolkien that have been auctioned on, that are available through auction, but manuscripts, there haven't been that many, and so I think it's a challenge for appraisers to come up with a definite value, because who knows?
Of course, and you will never know, probably, because it's invaluable, as you said.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, really, it's priceless in that regard. Although, I mean, we can scan and preserve the content of it in other ways, but still, the original items are one of a kind.
And I know that you said that it is a very guarded collection, and you have to have certain authorizations in order to check it. But regarding the Marquette University or the collection, like, are you doing something in general to promote it? Because I know that you're researching, but do you also do promotions of the collection, or is it just everybody comes to you because you're so popular?
Yeah, it doesn't need a lot of promotion. People find us and they learn about it, and because the access is so limited, it's hard to satisfy everyone. I have promoted it more locally. A couple of times a year, I will have a public showing where people can come and take a look at and see some of the original manuscripts. Before the pandemic, I used to do about 8 of them a year, and I'd limit it to about 25 people because that's what could fit in the room easily. But my time has become less and less. And so what I decided to do this year is to have 2 public showings, one in March and one in September. The March one is around the time of Tolkien Reading Day, around March 25th. And then the one in September, of course, is around the 22nd for Hobbit Day, Bilbo and Frodo's birthday. And the idea was I would do a public showing, but make it a little bit bigger, like 50 people. And so I promoted that, I posted that, and within 72 hours, all of those spots were taken. And I have a long wait list already for September. And I really didn't do a lot of promoting of it, just a little bit on social media. And then people pass it along, and all of a sudden everybody knows about it. And I feel bad because there's so many people that would like to see this stuff, but a couple times a year is about all that I'm able to do, because it's a lot of work to do a public showing. It consumes most of a day to set it up and do it.
So if a member of the Society of the Mexican Society, Tolkien Society, would like to attend, should we write to you? I know that you were saying that on social media, but you also said that you have like a list of people that want to go and see the collection. So what will be the procedures or the steps in order to sign ourselves up to see one of them?
My plan is to announce the dates in January, like for next year, and so it probably would be best to write around January, early January, and say that I'm thinking of coming this year, and I can see if I can try to get a spot ahead of the rush. And I mean, because it would be nice. I mean, I would love to have people be able to come from afar and not just have it be people around Milwaukee that are coming to this thing. So I like the idea of trying to help people who are coming from a great distance to be able to visit.
And for the fans out here, you were saying that you were having these collections of fandom. Like, what kind of fandom did you also have in your collection, and what can we do in order to incorporate more into your collection?
I started the oral history collection as a way to kind of capture the fandom, because I've been struggling about how to collect that. I mean, we also harvest websites and archive those. The fandom is so hard to document because it's so huge, and so much of it is based on the internet, and there are way too many sites and way too many places to be able to document it all. The textual documents, like the fan magazines, those are valuable for our collection. We have some other objects, but we're not a museum, though, so we do have some things like three-dimensional objects or textiles like clothing, T-shirts, that sort of thing that are expressions of the fandom. But I usually collect that stuff more to provide a sample of what's out there, because we aren't a museum, so some of those things, like all the toys and the figurines and that, we can't collect everything, I'm afraid. So I'm not sure if the group publishes a newsletter or has some publications, and that would certainly be welcome to provide, so I could add it to the collection. That would be great.
Do you have any budget to acquire new works if they were up there in the public, or is just what you have and that's it?
We do have something called the Tolkien Archives Fund, which was established in the 1980s, and that does produce money each year that we can use to acquire new things. And so, but it can be used. One of the things it can do is be used to acquire new things, and the other thing it's been doing is to help support some of the projects, like especially the digital reprocessing project. It's helped be able to hire people to help with that, and to provide all the computer infrastructure needed to make the scans available. But we have occasionally purchased items at auction. The problem is that those are so expensive. Like Tolkien letters, if they go up for auction, the price is so high that we can't afford to get them. Sometimes I've put in a bid on behalf of Marquette for a letter or something, and it turns out that the final price is many times more than what we could have afforded to spend. So it's limited, but we do acquire the books that are published. We'll order and bring those into the collection as well. The Tolkien Fund helped support the exhibition we did at the museum, so we have a little bit of money to work with.
And during these 12 years, right? 12 years that you have worked with the archive, is there something that you have acquired that you said, I did acquire that, like that you're very proud of? Everything is amazing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm hoping that I'm hoping that the future will hold different and new acquisitions. I am happy that one of the things I was looking to acquire as well are the papers of Tolkien scholars with their research files and their papers and such. And I'm happy to say that eventually the papers of Verlyn Flieger, which is a name some people may be familiar with, a Tolkien scholar, that her Tolkien papers will come to Marquette and be available for researchers to come and use and read her correspondence with various people and her notes and drafts of stuff. So I'm kind of pleased about bringing that in. In terms of the Tolkien manuscripts themselves, I mean, there haven't necessarily been. There's some Tolkien letters that I've been able to acquire. Probably one of them I'm most proud of. I actually did almost nothing to make happen, but there was a woman from California who contacted me and said she had a Tolkien letter and asked if Marquette wanted it, and I said sure, yeah. And so she literally sent it to us free of charge.
Wow.
Yeah. She said that she didn't want her children fighting over it, so she decided to give it to Marquette. And so that was great. I'm very proud of being able to bring that in, even though she did all the work, and it was really, I didn't go out looking for her.
Very wise lady. And just to sum up, what will be the future of the Marquette archives and the Tolkien archives? What do you see in the future?
I see hopefully completion or completion of that digital project, which I call Anduin. We name it after the river of the great river of Wilderland, Anduin. I'd like to see that finished or in a state where it's reached its full functionality, and I'd like to see obviously the fandom collection finished, the oral history project finished. That would be nice. But I think after I retire, looking back, probably the biggest contribution will be having found a way through the digital system for researchers to be able to navigate and study the manuscripts more easily, because the way you had to research before the digital version was it worked, but it was difficult and it took a long time. And so I think the work that we're doing with the digital project makes it easier, so that when people come here, they can more quickly study the manuscripts and get the information that they need.
Well, I think those are all the questions that we have here. I don't know if you have any other information that you would like to provide us here for the Tolkien Society in Mexico.
No, it's a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you for inviting me to speak to the group. And if anybody expects to find their way up to Milwaukee to visit, to write to me and let me know in advance that they'll be visiting.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to say also this in Spanish. Pues muchísimas gracias, Will. Muchas gracias por estar aquí. A nombre de la Sociedad Tolkienili de México, a mí me tocó por parte de The Anglo Library hacer esta entrevista, de la cual estoy muy afortunada de hacer. Qué maravilla estar contigo, Will. So this is wonderful for me as a librarian. I don't know if you know, but I'm in charge of a library that is all in English in Mexico City. So it is something quite special in particular as well. So I'm so happy to be here. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Y para los que apenas están uniendo con nosotros, síganos en nuestras redes de la Sociedad Tolkieniana de México, también de la de the Anglo Library. Do you have any social media that we should follow as well, Will?
I do have, I have like a collection page on Facebook that I created for the collection. It's like an offshoot of my own account. But probably my biggest failing is I'm not really a social media guy, so I don't have a lot of accounts in other areas. So that's really the only, I think, thing to follow is that Facebook collection page right now, I'm afraid.
Well, that's something that we can still work on, but I know that there are some challenges knowing that it is all under the Tolkien state. But thank you again. Muchísimas gracias. And I will be saying thank you everybody that is here and hope to see you again.